When we talk about respect, most people are waiting for someone else to give it to them. They're waiting for their boss to see their value, their partner to treat them better, their friends to finally show up the way they deserve. But let's be honest, that's backwards. Because the truth is this: no one will ever consistently respect you more than you respect yourself. That's not a motivational quote. That's a psychological fact. See, people are highly perceptive. We pick up on energy before we process language. When you walk into a room with self-respect, not arrogance, not ego, but grounded self-worth, it changes the dynamic. It's not about dominance, and it's not about playing power games. It's about alignment. When you're aligned with your values, your principles, and your non-negotiables, you move differently. And when you move differently, people respond differently. This isn't about being loud, it's about being clear. Self-respect starts in the micro moments. It's in the way you talk to yourself after a mistake. It's in the way you uphold your standards when no one is watching. You'd space for kindness. It's how you carry yourself even when things around you feel unstable. You don't need validation to prove your worth. You need consistency to reinforce it. Let me ask you this: how do you treat someone you deeply respect? You listen to them. You make space for their voice. You don't interrupt them or second-guess their ideas. You trust them. Now, flip that around. Do you do the same for yourself? Do you listen to your own instincts, or do you constantly override them to make others comfortable? Because here's the catching: when you consistently disrespect yourself, you're training other people to do the same. That's why self-respect isn't just a concept, it's a discipline. You've got to build it like a muscle. It shows up in your posture, your tone of voice, your decisions, your silence. It shows up in the people you allow around you and the energy you no longer tolerate. And that word right there, tolerate, is key. What you tolerate, you invite. What you allow, you encourage. Every time you let a boundary slide, just this once, you're reinforcing the idea that your needs come second. You can't expect others to respect you if you're not modeling that behavior yourself. Respect isn't something you demand. It's something you embody. You become it. You live it. And here's the deeper layering. Self-respect is a mirror. It reflects what you believe about your identity. If you don't believe you're worthy of respect at your core, for kindness, nothing external will ever be enough. Not the praise, not the achievements, not the attention. Because you'll be trying to fill a void that only internal alignment can satisfy. That's where philosophy meets psychology. Because when the ancient Stoics said, "Know thyself," they weren't being poetic. They were being practical. Self-knowledge leads to self-respect. When you know your values, really know them, you stop outsourcing your behavior to other people's approval. You act from principle, not pressure. And that creates internal peace. A person who's grounded in their principles doesn't overact. They don't chase. For kindness, they don't cling. They don't need to convince anyone. Their respect for themselves is enough. But let's not pretend this is easy. Self-respect takes courage. It means disappointing people who benefited from your self-abandonment. It means walking away from dynamics where you're liked more when you shrink. It means holding the line even when your voice shakes. That's not weakness, that's strength in its rawest form. Because the easiest thing in the world is to follow the crowd, to make yourself smaller, to stay agreeable so you don't ruffle feathers. But that's not respect. That's survival. And we're not here to survive. We're here to thrive, to evolve, to become the kind of person who doesn't just talk about respect, but lives in a way that demands it, silently, powerfully, and consistently. So if you're tired of being disrespected by people, by circumstances, even by your own habits, Start here. Start with how you talk to yourself. Start with what you allow. Start with what you no longer excuse. Because the way you treat yourself teaches the world how to treat you. Respect begins the moment you stop negotiating your worth. Let's talk about boundaries. Real ones. Not the kind you post about or write in your journal, but never act on. I'm talking about the kind of boundaries that you actually live by, that you enforce, that you protect. Because here's the true thing, people don't disrespect you out of nowhere. They usually test you first. And if they find no resistance, no standard, no line in the sand, they cross. Not because they're inherently cruel, but because human behavior naturally pushes against what's unspoken or inconsistent. So if you're tired of people walking all over you, ask yourself, have I actually drawn a line, or have I just silently hoped they wouldn't go too far? Boundaries aren't about building walls or shutting people out. They're about clarity, about being direct without being cruel, firm without being defensive. See, people think being kind means being soft, and that's a mistake. True kindness has structure. It says, I love you, but I won't allow you to mistreat me. It says, you're free to feel how you feel, but I'm responsible for how I respond. That's what boundaries do. They make it very clear where you end and where someone else begins. And in that clarity, there's peace. Think about it psychologically. When we lack boundaries, it's not usually because we don't know what we need. It's because we're afraid of the consequences of expressing it, afraid of being judged, rejected, abandoned. So we people please, we stay quiet, we tolerate, and all the while resentment builds. Quiet resentment is the cost of unclear boundaries. And here's the kicker, eventually that resentment turns inward. You start feeling angry at yourself for not speaking up, for not walking away, for not honoring your own limits. And let's be honest, the hardest part about setting boundaries isn't defining them, it's enforcing them, especially with people who are used to your silence. The first time you say, I'm not available for that, it might shake the room. You'll be called difficult, cold, selfish, even disloyal. Not because you are, but because you've disrupted a dynamic that depended on your self-sacrifice. That discomfort is real. But you have to get comfortable being uncomfortable if you want to be respected. It's not about being aggressive. That's not power. That's insecurity in disguise. Real authority comes from calm conviction. You can say, no, without raising your voice. You can walk away without proving your point. You don't need to explain your boundaries in a 5-paragraph essay. A simple, that doesn't work for me, is enough. When you over-explain, you're looking for permission, for kindness, and boundaries aren't about getting permission. They're about honoring your own standard, whether others agree with it or not. Philosophically, boundaries are a reflection of your identity. You show people what you believe you're worthy of by what you accept. When you draw a boundary, you're not rejecting the other person. You're affirming yourself. And that matters. Because too often we confuse boundaries with conflict. We think keeping the peace means keeping quiet. But peace that comes at the cost of your integrity isn't peace. It's performance. And long term, that performance will drain you. You don't need to be angry to set a boundary. In fact, the most powerful boundaries come from a place of clarity, not emotion. When you know who you are, what you value, and what you refuse to entertain, your energy changes. People can feel it. They may not like it, but they'll recognize it. And even if they test it, they'll start to realize you're not someone who folds under pressure. And here's the thing, once you start living with strong boundaries, your relationships shift. The ones rooted in convenience fall away. The ones rooted in mutual respect grow stronger. Because boundaries don't just protect you, They clarify your tribe. They help you attract people who honor what you honor, who speak your language, who don't see your strength as a threat, but as a standard. Now, will it be easy? No. Will everyone applaud your growth? Definitely not. But let me tell you, choosing to live with clear, unapologetic boundaries is one of the highest forms of self-respect. It says, I know who I am. I know what I bring. And I'm no longer willing to negotiate that for comfort, approval, or temporary peace. So the next time you feel disrespected, ask yourself, what boundary have I failed to express or enforce? That question alone can shift everything, because you can't control how others behave, but you can absolutely control what you allow, what you engage with, and what you accept as normal. Boundaries don't push people away. They filter the wrong ones out and make space for what you truly deserve. There's a moment, quiet, subtle, when you realize someone doesn't respect you. It's not always loud. It's not always dramatic. Sometimes it's in the way they interrupt you every time you speak, or how your concerns are brushed aside like background noise. And in that moment, you have a choice: stay and shrink, or step back and reclaim your space. One of the most powerful decisions you'll ever make is to remove yourself from environments where disrespect is the norm, not the exception. Not with rage, not with vengeance, just with clarity. That's not weakness. That's power. You don't owe your presence to people who misuse it. Your energy is a resource, and who you give it to determines what kind of life you live. If someone shows you, consistently, that they cannot handle you with respect, then staying is no longer about them. It's about you. It's about the story you're telling yourself about what you think you deserve. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. Many of us tolerate disrespect not because we're unaware, but because we've become emotionally entangled in the hope of change. We think if we're patient enough, kind enough, forgiving enough, they'll finally get it. But psychology tells us something different. Behavior is data. Patterns are more honest than promises. Let that sink in. Patterns are more honest than promises. So, if someone continues to violate your boundaries, dismiss your feelings, or make you question your worth, that's not a communication issue. That's a values mismatch. And you cannot force alignment where there is none. You cannot beg someone into respecting what they never learned to value. That's not your job. Your job is to recognize the signs and respond accordingly, not with chaos, but with control. Walking away doesn't mean you hate them. It doesn't mean you're bitter. It means you've stopped participating in cycles that dishonor you. It means your standard has evolved. And yes, it's hard, especially when it involves family, longtime friends, or people you've invested deeply in. But let's not confuse loyalty with self-betrayal. Staying where you're consistently disrespected does not make you strong. It makes you complicit. There's a philosophical element to this as well. The Stoics believed that peace of mind is the highest human good. And peace doesn't exist where respect is absent. Every time you stay in a disrespectful environment, you trade peace for familiarity. And that's a bad deal, because familiarity can be toxic. Just because something feels normal doesn't mean it's healthy. In fact, many people are stuck in disrespectful dynamics because it feels emotionally familiar, echoes of old wounds they never healed. That's where self-awareness comes in. You've got to ask yourself, am I staying because this is love, or because this is what I've been conditioned to accept as love? Let's get practical. Removing yourself doesn't always mean cutting someone off instantly. Sometimes it means creating distance while observing change. It means limiting access without making announcements. Not everything needs a confrontation. Sometimes the most effective boundary is your absence. Silence is not weakness, it's strategic. It forces clarity. It creates space. It says, I'm no longer available for this version of the relationship. And make no mistake, people will notice. They may call you cold, distant, dramatic. That's their discomfort speaking. Your growth disrupts patterns that benefited from your silence. But you can't live your life trying to be digestible for people who have no intention of ever respecting your fullness. You weren't made to be small. You weren't made to fit. You were made to stand. Think about the environments where you thrive, where your voice is heard, where your ideas are valued, where your presence is appreciated. Those spaces exist, but you'll never find them if you keep staying in places that drain you. Respect isn't something you beg for. It's something you align with. And alignment requires separation. Sometimes you've got to leave the room so you can find the one you truly belong in. Now, some people stay out of fear of loneliness, fear of starting over, fear of being judged. But let me tell you something, loneliness in an environment that honors your worth is far more peaceful than being surrounded by people who make you feel invisible. Disrespect is subtle erosion. Over time, it chips away at your self-trust, your voice, your spirit. And one day you wake up and realize you don't even recognize yourself anymore. Don't let it get to that point. You have the power to choose something different, to walk away, to regroup, to rebuild. That's not quitting, that's evolving. And evolution always involves loss. You'll lose the noise, the chaos, the dysfunction. And in its place you'll gain clarity, peace, and most importantly, self-respect. If you want to be respected, stop standing in places that require you to be disrespected to stay. One of the most liberating shifts you can make in life is this detach from the need for validation. Not because validation is inherently wrong, we're wired for connection, for acknowledgement, but because making your worth conditional on someone else's approval will trap you in a cycle of insecurity and emotional dependency. If you constantly need someone to validate your choices, your value, or your identity, then you're giving them silent control over your peace. And the moment they withdraw that approval, you collapse. That's not power. That's vulnerability in its most fragile form. This isn't about being emotionless. It's about being emotionally anchored. When your sense of self depends on how others see you, you become reactive. You shift your behavior based on their moods, their opinions, their preferences. You perform instead of live. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, you start editing yourself, watering yourself down so you can remain acceptable. But here's the problem with that. If your peace can be taken away by someone's silence or someone's opinion, it was never peace. It was dependency. Detachment doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop clinging. You stop allowing your inner world to be dictated by external responses. It's a psychological posture, calm, centered, grounded. When you detach, you regain the power of choice. You can choose how to respond, what to invest in, what to walk away from. You're no longer reacting out of fear or insecurity. You're acting out of clarity. Let's be real, validation feels good. That dopamine hit when someone affirms you, praises you, likes you, it's addictive. But anything that can be given can also be withheld. And when your emotional stability depends on something outside of you, it will always be fragile. That's why detachment is a form of emotional discipline. You're not numbing yourself. You're training yourself not to need what can be taken. This isn't just philosophy, it's psychology. Studies show that people who practice internal validation, meaning they evaluate themselves based on their own values, their own goals, have higher self-esteem and stronger mental resilience. They're less susceptible to peer pressure, less affected by social comparison, and more capable of navigating conflict without losing their identity. That's what detachment gives you: identity stability. But let's be honest, this isn't easy. We all want to be liked. We all want to be understood. And there's nothing wrong with that. The danger comes when our identity hinges on it. You can be deeply kind, deeply empathetic, and still not allow others to dictate your internal state. That's not cold. That's wisdom. Here's where things get even deeper. Often, our need for validation stems from unresolved wounds, childhood experiences where love was conditional, approval was scarce, or acceptance had to be earned. We carry those patterns into adulthood, trying to prove we're worthy by performing for love, over-giving, over-explaining, trying to be everything to everyone. And all that does is exhaust you. You become a shell of yourself, liked by many, truly known by none, including yourself. Detachment is the process of unlearning that. It's saying, I don't need to be perfect to be at peace. I don't need your applause to feel valuable. I am already enough, and I don't require your confirmation to live like it. That's not arrogance. That's maturity. That's what it means to grow. Now, how does this connect to being disrespected? Simple. The more you crave external approval, the more you tolerate disrespect to keep it. You'll explain away toxic behavior, minimize mistreatment, stay in dynamics that chip away at your soul, just to avoid being misunderstood or disliked. But when you detach, you no longer fear those things. You stop begging for closure. You stop needing someone to finally see your worth. You just see it yourself and act accordingly. And when you act from that place, when your self-worth is internally sourced, people notice. You stop over-explaining. You stop over-apologizing. You stop shrinking. And ironically, that's when respect follows. Because people respect what is self-contained, what is grounded, what doesn't move with the wind of opinion. They may not always like it, but they'll feel it. So the work is simple, but not easy. Detach. Stop tying your self-image to how you're received. Free yourself from the emotional roller coaster of constantly wondering what others think. Let your peace come from within, not from performance, not from perception, but from principle. Because once you no longer need to be validated to feel valuable, you're unshakable. Detach from validation, and you'll reclaim the power to walk through this world with calm authority, no longer reactive, no longer begging, just rooted, clear, and whole.